It's clumsy, but yes, it works. Okay, so we're going to do altitude. And it's very interesting because, you know, in this room, what is the altitude of Lafayette? Anybody know in number of feet? Anybody have an idea? Maybe the TAs can look it up. I'm going to say it's about 650 feet, something like that. Not very high. If you go out to Colorado, and I was there this summer. I'm not a skier, but I was in Vail, and there was still snow on the ground in June. But that's about 7,500 feet. And when I was driving when I left Vail and I was driving towards Denver, that's beautiful, there was a sign that said elevation, 10,000 feet. So when you get up high, you have less oxygen, the amount of altitude pressure, at sea level, the pressure is 1 altitude, right? And maybe that's another thing the TAs can look up. If you're at 7,500 feet, what's that in pressure? You know, at sea level, pressure is usually defined as 1 atmospheric pressure, if I remember right. So you guys work on that. Anyway, so it was 10,000 feet, and the hotel I stayed at in Vail had canned oxygen in the room. And I've never been into a hotel room where there was oxygen available. It wasn't free though. I think the can, it was a compressed can, and I think it was like $10, $15. But it said on there, if you're feeling lightheaded, you may want to, whatever. So, and the TAs, if you guys find that out, let me know. So, there's a problem with high altitude because you have less oxygen available to you. And so when you're low on oxygen, you can say the animal is suffering hypoxemia. Hypoxemia, right? Hypoxemia. I guess I could look that up for you guys on my one look here so you can see the spelling. Well, there's hypoxia is a word that means low oxygen, deficiency of oxygen. And then hypoxemia, that means low oxygen in the blood. So those things are not equal, right? So when you see hypoxemia, then that means low oxygen in the blood. And you tend to have hypoxemia. Well, then one of the physiological responses is the kidney is always monitoring oxygen in your blood. And when the kidneys sense a hypoxic condition or hypoxemia, it releases a hormone. So the kidneys, and when part of the function of the kidneys are that of an endocrine organ, right? They make urine, that's their most famous job, I guess. But another job is to make a hormone when there is low oxygen sensed in the blood. And who can tell me what hormone that is? Erythropoietin. And that's actually, I'll probably spell that out here for you too. Because it's a great name. A lot of hormones don't have a great name, right? Because sometimes they don't tell you what they do. But erythropoietin means making red. Erythro means red, and it's referring to red blood cells. And whenever you see erythropoietin, that means producing. So here's this chain of events. The animal or you go to a low oxygen situation, and elevation is a good example. Your kidneys sense this. If you have two kidneys, they'll both release erythropoietin. If you have one kidney, that kidney will release erythropoietin. And you guys know that if somebody loses a kidney when they're young, the remaining kidney is larger than it would be normally. Okay? So more tissue to release erythropoietin. Then, that circulates in the blood, and it's like, remember, hormones are like keys. So this is erythropoietin, and it's going to have action on a receptor that it fits in and turns. And where are the receptors for erythropoietin? So bashful you guys are. What's that? Lungs is a good guess. I could see what you're thinking, right? Well, maybe it's going to do something with the lungs. That's incorrect, but it's a good thing to bring out, right? So note, the lungs are not the target tissue of erythropoietin. Liver is another good guess, but it's an incorrect answer. But you know, these things are, it's good to know what's incorrect, right, as well. Here we go. Heart, you guys are good. You're going to name all the organs. Heart is another good guess, but it's not right. Christian. Bone marrow. And then, you know, you remember after you study hormones, you can talk about the hormone, where it's from, its target tissue, and what's the response of the target tissue. In this case, bone marrow increases its synthesis of red blood cells, its production of red blood cells. So then, what happens to your hematocrit? See how this is all bundled together? After that physiological chain of events, we said, then what happens to your hematocrit?
It increases.
Increases your hematocrit, or also called Pap cell volume. So it's a response to counteract the lower oxygen content. And so if you're a marathon runner, you train in Colorado Springs. That's what they do. So you go from here to Colorado Springs. I'm not sure what the elevation of Colorado Springs is. I'm going to guess 7, 8. And then your Pap cell volume is increased over your normal. Then you run the marathon at sea level. Okay? And that's what people do. Or, like this one guy in New York, he couldn't go to Colorado Springs. He bought a chamber and put his desk in this chamber in his office, and the chamber lowered the oxygen content of the air. And I saw a picture of this guy. He's in this like box in his office. Maybe he's a stockbroker. And so he's in this desk doing stuff, but the oxygen content of that chamber he was in was lower than the 21% like in this room. And so he was stimulating his kidneys to put out erythropoietin. Of course, if you're dishonest and unscrupulous, what do? What's that? You could do a blood transfusion, but that's risky.
Can't you like remove, like have like draw blood or whatever, and then inject it right before the race?
Well, you could do that, yes, but then again, that's risky. You know, the sanitation kind of thing.
Just inject straightly.
Yeah, fine. Buy erythropoietin and inject it, and that's what people do. So they're cheating. So there's a black market for erythropoietin. And by the way, if I don't tell you most hormones have an acronym, right? And it's EPO, all capital letters, erythropoietin. It'd be interesting to find out how much it is on the black market, but you can buy it. I'm not sure how easy it is to buy it, but you can buy almost anything on the internet, right? Or the dark web, or whatever it's called. Yeah, anyway. So people do that as well, inject erythropoietin. Now here's the other thing though, and somebody brought this up about a transfusion. Here's what you can do honestly, not for like an athlete. Let's say you're having elective surgery. What's elective surgery? So this is human medicine, elective.
It's not like mandatory, but you can choose to have it done.
Yeah, you say you're going to have something done, but it's like it doesn't really matter if it's tomorrow or a month from now. Maybe there's a benign tumor growing in your abdominal cavity. So here's what they do. You go to your physician, and he injects you with erythropoietin. Then you donate a pint of blood, but you keep the blood. Because if you're injected with erythropoietin, you can give blood more than the normal rate. Is it once every 8 weeks? Normal? Anybody? I used to donate blood. I lost. Anybody donate blood here? I was almost to the 2-gallon club. But anyway, I think it's like 8 weeks they recommend. But if you're injecting in a controlled situation, I think you can donate about every 2 weeks or so. So, like today, you can collect a pint of blood, right, from yourself. I mean, the physician would do this. Then inject erythropoietin, and 2 more weeks, get another pint, and then maybe another third pint. Now when you go into the surgery room, would you be worried if you need a pint or 2 of blood? Not at all. They wouldn't have to check it for anything. Why? It's yours. So if you're having elective surgery, and sometimes you never know how much blood you can lose, right? That's what people do if they have enough planning ahead. You can stock up 2 or 3 pints of your own blood. If you need it, it's there. And it's a pretty neat way to do it. And that's all very legal and very controlled. Okay. So, erythropoietin talks to the bone marrow. Well, of course, again, you read these things. I don't, read through that. But anyway, so high altitude is, a situation where you're going to get erythropoietin. Okay, so then, this says only read, so this is a long article. If you're interested in it, of course, you should read the whole thing. I would read the abstract, and then I will just test you on, I guess I'll test you if something's in the abstract, and then this section, normal kidney physiology, okay? So then you'll read that down to, so what I'm saying is not the whole article, down to right here. Now if you want to, read the rest of it, that's fine, but I'm just talking about the normal kidney physiology. Okay. Then, here's a little bit on erythropoietin. You should know it's a protein hormone, and I guess here it's called a glycoprotein. And they say cytokine, it's really, cytokines can be hormones. I'm going to call it a hormone released by the kidney in response to hypoxia. Okay, red blood cell production in the bone marrow. Okay, so what you should know is the kidneys are always making erythropoietin because you're always losing red blood cells. It'd be kind of interesting to know how many millions you lost during this class, but it's definitely in the millions. So millions had to be made, millions are lost, so you always need erythropoietin. But when you do sense the hypoxic condition, of course, you're going to make more erythropoietin. And so if you know it's a glycoprotein, then it's not universal across all animals, the structure. Okay, because I don't know if I've said it in this class, but like testosterone is a steroid, right? It doesn't vary. The bull elephant in Africa has the same testosterone that's in this room. And by the way, everybody in the room is making testosterone, whether you realize it or not. The protein hormones then are put together by like a series of amino acids, and that varies by species. So if you went to that physician and had the injection of erythropoietin, it would be probably synthesized in some laboratory by maybe a recombinant technique. Maybe some of the TAs look up how they make erythropoietin. And so they're going to make something that's active in the human. Okay? But if you took that same bottle and injected it into a dog, your response would probably be different. Because it's going to be a little different structure. And so a lot of times, things do work in a different species, and so you talk about cross-reactivity from one species to another. If it's 100%, then it works. You know, if a dog had the same response to the same amount of erythropoietin, then it's like 100% cross-reactive. But sometimes it's 50% or sometimes very low. The TAs, did you guys look up the other questions I had first? Tell me what was the response.
The altitude in Lafayette is 692.
692 in Lafayette altitude feet.
And Colorado Springs is 6,035.
Okay, 6,035.
And the PSI, the atmospheric pressure at 7,000 feet is 11.34.
11.34. Okay, so how does that compare with at sea level then? Look up the pressure at sea level.
14.69.
Okay, so it's so it's 14.69 versus 11.34, whatever. So it's, I mean, as you go up, it's got to get less. You know, there's less air on top of you. Okay, so work on that erythropoietin.
I found it.
Okay,
So there is recombinant human erythropoietin.
Okay,
it's
so-
expressed in mammalian cells instead of bacteria.
yeah. Whenever you see recombinant, that means they're making it in bacteria. So it's recombinant EPO, right?
But it's not in bacteria. They use mammalian cells.
Oh, they use mammalian cells to make it. Okay, so they program mammalian cells. Okay, so it's not bacteria, but they're genetically altering a cell to make recombinant EPO. So then you would have a little r in front of EPO, recombinant erythropoietin, because that tells you that it was made and it wasn't like isolated from some animal, right? Because everybody here has EPO in their blood, and it could be, you could take a blood sample and get EPO out of it, and that wouldn't be recombinant, that would be just straight EPO. Okay, thank you. Okay, so anyway, let's see. Of course, you're going to read this, the pharmacology, half-life in blood. Okay, yeah. I mean, when you read these things, obviously you know me well enough to go, oh wow, Rod would like that, right? 5 hours. May vary between endogenous and various recombinant versions, okay? So it'd be interesting to know, because you wouldn't expect recombinant EPO to have the exact same half-life as regular EPO, right? So they're talking about, you know, they maybe they have some formula where it makes it and it's a longer half-life, okay? So here, this article is talking about, notice at the beginning they said cytokine, right? But down here they're using the term hormone. So let's call it a hormone. You know, cytokines are substances made by cells and they can affect another cell, but it gets to be pretty complex. There's a lot of cytokines. So we'll call it a regular hormone made and goes someplace else. Let's see, I just saw an interesting word. Okay, so then it tends to decrease apoptosis by promoting their survival through protecting these cells from apoptosis. And apoptosis is basically programmed cell death. It's really not, I don't like how it says or cell death, because it's really programmed cell death. Something has told the cell to die, rather than cell death could be lack of oxygen or something like that. Okay. Mechanisms of action, okay, right, binding to some receptor. You've got to know that if you're talking about hormones, that's a principle. It has to find its receptor. Hormones don't work without binding to receptors, okay? Okay, and I'm going to just reset my camera here for a second. Okay, so synthesis and regulation, right? Okay, medical uses. Let's see if they talk about the. Okay, so like here it is. If you got chronic kidney disease, you might have to be injected with EPO every once in a while, right? Because if you have bad kidneys, they're making less erythropoietin, could lead to anemia. And of course, if you've got other cases, okay, package inserts, warning, yes, history. I don't tend to ask much about history, but it's such a short little section. Usage as a doping product, here it is, been banned since 1990. And that's always a thing with these exogenous hormones. Sometimes a test can't differentiate between the native hormone, the endogenous hormone, and the exogenous hormone. That's always trouble. Anyway, okay, now we're going to go to something interesting. Cattle. Now, I've got to fix this link because you know how places change their thing. But here, and if you want to read it before I change it, you just go up here and go high mountain disease. I saw it this morning. I just haven't changed the website. So it's called high mountain disease, also called brisket disease. And it's got a nice little summary. And of course, what better university to do this than Colorado? Okay. So high mountain disease, also known as brisket, thank you guys. And the brisket of cattle is that chest area that protrudes above in front of the front legs. Okay? So let me show you that maybe in case you're not a cattle person. Let's do cow. This could be dangerous, couldn't it? Okay. You know, the internet. Okay. Right here, that's the brisket. And lo and behold, the heart is right in there too, right? About where that finger is pointing, okay? I think you guys can see that. Brisket right here, okay? And, the other names aren't, high altitude disease, of course, high mountain disease, brisket, those are the three common ones. And it occurs above 5,000 feet, okay? And when you read these things, you should know the physiology, right? Why do you get high mountain disease? And this is a nice little summary. The long story short is when the hypoxic condition is sensed, it ends up causing high pulmonary blood pressure. Now that's not the systemic blood pressure that your arm gives you, right? It's the pulmonary system, right? Because there's two parts to the heart, right? There's really two pumps side by side. And it's the right side of the heart that is pumping blood to the lungs, right? Remember, left leaves the right ventricle, goes out the pulmonary artery, the only artery in the body that carries oxygen-poor blood. Pulmonary artery. And it comes back in the pulmonary vein, and it's the only vein that has oxygen-rich blood coming back from the lungs. Goes to the left atrium, right? Anyway, you end up getting high blood pressure in the pulmonary system. And they do a great job of telling what happens, but because of this, you get pulmonary hypertension, and it's affecting the right side of the heart, just as we said, because, the right side of the heart is pumping harder than it usually has to pump. And so sooner or later you can get heart failure. And so whenever you see this PAP, that's pulmonary arterial pressure. So years ago, they discovered this response in some cattle. But lo and behold, you can genetically select cattle that survive in mountain conditions. Okay? And so the swelling of the brisket is because there's edema. Because there's so much pressure that fluid is leaving the pulmonary artery and collecting in the brisket. Okay? That's the bottom line here. So I'm going to remember that link if you want to read it before I change it. It's just search there, high mountain disease. So then lo and behold, here's some more reading about high mountain disease, brisket disease. And it's a little bit redundant. But then you can develop a test. You can test cattle for their arterial pressure. And over time, select animals that don't have a big response to altitude. Okay? So the PAP test is the best indicator available, identifying animals that are predisposed. So if it has a high pressure, that's more likely to develop. Okay? And so, in efforts to cut losses, cattlemen should identify those animals, especially the bulls, with high pulmonary arterial pressure and cull them. Right? Because you can have one bull, and if you're not familiar with cattle, that bull is going to affect at least 25, 35 brood cows. But the brood cow only affects one calf, one offspring, right? So you got quite a deal here. And so the last link talks about this ranch that does the testing. And they're having a bull sale next month. The T. Hart Ranch. That's beautiful right there. And let's see. And so what I'm going to do is, remember how that link went to their main page? But that's not what you should read. You should read up here. This Pap testing. So maybe I'll try to remind you about that. And here, it's pretty impressive. We develop and Pap test our bulls at our lowest elevation. The lowest one they have is 7,680 feet. That's pretty amazing. I wonder how high they go. Maybe about 10,000. So they test them. They only save those bulls, and then too bad that's kind of that bad color. But then they will not use any bulls. And I guess this talks about the procedure, right heart catheterization. Okay, catheterization. That's where you put some tube into the blood vessel, and it must have a pressure sensor. They connect it somehow. Anybody ever put a catheter into an animal's blood vessel? Okay, you guys have, like in the dog, the leg of the dog with the butterfly little thing. Yeah. You can do all kinds of stuff like that. Anyway, they do that. They do the testing. The fine catheter is passed through a needle in the jugular vein, right? Okay, with blood flow in. Okay, so then they're going to take it up and into the pulmonary artery just short of the branches to the lungs. So they're going to actually be in the pulmonary artery and measure the pressure. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, and here it is, heritability. So then, if you ever see heritability that's 40 to 80, if you take in genetics, you know that's highly heritable, right? I don't think I've ever seen a heritability of 84%. That's incredible. So the key is you can genetically select away from it if it's that heritable, right? Then you get rid of it. Okay, that's it. Try to come here tomorrow if you can, 11:30. It should be a very good topic. I-131, cat, hyperthyroidism. I'll try to make those link changes tonight.